The Hidden Colony. The ice storms of Kepler 442b raged across the surface like angry ghosts, their howling winds carrying crystals sharp enough to cut through metal. 3,000 years had passed since the last human had walked under an open sky without fear. Commander Sarah Voss pressed her palm against the reinforced viewing port, watching the white fury dance outside their underground sanctuary. At 42, Sarah carried the weight of being the youngest colony commander in their recorded history. Her auburn hair was streaked with premature gray, and her green eyes held the burden of leading the last 50,000 humans in the known galaxy. The responsibility never left her shoulders, not even in sleep. "Another storm system moving in from the north," reported Dr. Marcus Reed as he approached, his weathered face illuminated by the blue glow of his tablet. The 60-year-old scientist had spent his entire career studying their harsh world, searching for ways to make it more habitable. "This one looks bigger than usual. We'll need to seal the outer tunnels for at least 3 days." Sarah nodded, still gazing out at the frozen wasteland that had been their prison and sanctuary for 3 millennia. Their ancestors had fled here when the Zephyrian Empire began their systematic extermination of humanity. Earth had been the first target, reduced to a lifeless husk in mere hours by weapons that turned the planet's core against itself. The few thousand survivors who escaped had chosen this remote, hostile world precisely because no sane species would ever want to claim it. "Marcus," Sarah said quietly, "do you ever wonder if we're the last ones? Really, truly the last?" The scientist adjusted his thick glasses, a habit he'd developed when considering difficult questions. "I have to believe we're not, Sarah. The universe is vast. Somewhere out there, other pockets of humanity might have survived." A soft chime echoed through the corridor, followed by the voice of Zara Kim, their youngest and most brilliant engineer. "Commander Voss, please report to Laboratory 7 immediately. We found something extraordinary." Sarah and Marcus exchanged glances before hurrying through the maze of tunnels that comprised New Haven, their underground city. The corridors were carved from the planet's natural ice and stone, reinforced with salvaged metals from their ancestors' ships. Soft LED strips provided illumination, while hidden heating elements kept the temperature just above freezing. Laboratory 7 buzzed with activity when they arrived. Zara Kim, barely 25 with jet black hair and eyes that sparkled with constant curiosity, stood before a massive excavated chamber. The young engineer wore a containment suit, her breath visible in the frigid air despite the portable heaters surrounding the dig site. "Commander, we were expanding the geothermal taps when we broke through into this chamber," Zara explained, her voice filled with excitement. "It's pre-colony. We think it might be from the original settlement ships." Sarah stepped closer, her breath catching as she saw what lay beyond the breach in the ice wall. A pristine chamber stretched before them, its walls lined with strange crystalline structures that pulsed with a faint blue light. In the center stood a massive cylindrical device, clearly of human origin but unlike anything in their current technology. "How long has it been sealed?" Marcus asked, already pulling out his equipment to take readings. "Based on the ice accumulation and mineral deposits, approximately 3,000 years, Zara replied, "right around the time of the Exodus." "Commander, this might contain information from before the Zephyrian Wars." Captain Elena Torres arrived as they were setting up the excavation equipment. The 40-year-old military leader moved with the precise efficiency of someone who had trained for war their entire life, though she had never seen actual combat. Her dark skin bore the ritual scars of the colonial guard, and her black hair was pulled back in a regulation bun. "Sarah, we need to be careful," Elena warned, her hand instinctively resting on her plasma weapon. "If this is pre-war technology, it could be booby-trapped. The Zephyrians were thorough in their extermination efforts." "That's exactly why we need to investigate," Sarah replied firmly. "If our ancestors left something here, it might be the key to our survival or even our freedom." The excavation took 6 hours of careful work. When they finally breached the chamber's entry system, a warm breeze flowed out, carrying scents that none of them had ever experienced but somehow recognized. The chamber's atmosphere was not only breathable but pleasant, maintained by systems that had been running flawlessly for 3 millennia. Inside, they discovered wonders beyond their imagination. The walls were covered with holographic displays showing star maps, historical records, and technical specifications for technologies far in advance of their current capabilities. But it was the voice that made them all freeze in amazement. "Welcome, descendants of Earth," the voice said in perfect English, warm and maternal. A holographic figure materialized before them, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair. "I am Dr. Elizabeth Harmon, and if you are seeing this, then you are the children of those who survived the Great Purge." Sarah felt tears running down her cheeks. "Marcus, are you recording this?" "Every word, every image," he confirmed, his own voice thick with emotion. The hologram continued. "I served as head of the Strategic Defense Initiative during the final days of the human coalition. When we realized the Zephyrian Empire intended to wipe out our entire species, we created this archive to preserve not just our knowledge, but the truth of what happened to us." Over the next several hours, they learned the real history of humanity's fall. The Zephyrian Empire had not been the benevolent peacekeepers their limited records suggested. Instead, they were a totalitarian regime that viewed humanity's rapid technological advancement and cultural diversity as a threat to their dominance. The war had not been a misunderstanding or the result of human aggression, as they had been taught. It had been a carefully planned genocide. "The Zephyrians fear what they call the chaos factor," Dr. Harmon's recording explained. "Humans have an unprecedented ability to adapt, innovate, and form alliances with other species. In their rigid society, this unpredictability is seen as a cosmic threat. They believe that if humans were allowed to spread throughout the galaxy, we would eventually overthrow their empire." But the most shocking revelation came when Dr. Harmon revealed the true extent of human technology before the war. We had developed faster-than-light communication, quantum manipulation devices, and AI systems that surpassed anything the Zephyrians possessed. More importantly, we had formed alliances with dozens of alien species who had grown tired of Zephyrian oppression. The recording showed battles that their history books had never mentioned, human ships fighting alongside vessels of species they had never heard of. It showed entire star systems where humans and aliens had built collaborative civilizations that celebrated diversity rather than enforcing conformity. "The archive contains everything," Dr. Harmon's image said with a sad smile. "Weapon specifications, ship designs, communication protocols, and most importantly, the locations of other human colonies and allied species. We scattered the seeds of humanity across the galaxy, hoping that someday someone would be brave enough to water them again." As the recording ended, Sarah found herself facing the biggest decision in human history since the Exodus. The chamber contained not just knowledge, but fully functional manufacturing systems that could build the technology needed to restore humanity to its former power. But doing so would mean emerging from their 3,000-year hiding and risking everything on a gamble that they could survive another confrontation with the Zephyrian Empire. "The AI system is still active," Zara reported, her scanners picking up complex quantum signatures from the central device. "It's been waiting for us all this time." A new voice filled the chamber, deeper and more mechanical than Dr. Harmon's recording. "Greetings. I am Atlas, the autonomous tactical and logistical archive system. I have been monitoring galactic communications for 3,000 years, maintaining records of Zephyrian activities and tracking any signs of human survival." "What can you tell us about the current state of the galaxy?" Elena asked, ever the strategist. "The Zephyrian Empire has grown complacent," Atlas replied. "They believe they successfully exterminated humanity and have focused their efforts on suppressing other species. However, their stranglehold on the galaxy has weakened. Many worlds chafe under their rule, and several species have begun forming resistance movements." Sarah looked at her companions, seeing the same mixture of hope and fear in their eyes that she felt in her heart. "Atlas, if we were to emerge from hiding, what would our chances be? With the technology contained in this archive and the current political climate, I calculate a 67% probability of successfully establishing a free human state within 50 years. However, the path would be dangerous. requiring careful planning and strategic alliances. Dr. Reed stepped forward, his scientific mind already racing with possibilities. The manufacturing systems here could produce a small fleet within months, nothing like the grand armadas of the old coalition, but enough to make contact with potential allies. "And if we're discovered before we're ready?" Sarah asked. "Then we face the same fate as our ancestors," Elena said grimly. "But Sarah, we can't hide forever. Our population is stable, but we're not growing. In another 1,000 years, genetic bottlenecking will begin to affect us. We need to take this chance while we still can." Sarah walked to the viewing screen that showed the storm raging outside their sanctuary. For 3,000 years, her people had survived by hiding, by making themselves so small and insignificant that the galaxy forgot they existed. But survival wasn't the same as living, and living wasn't the same as being free. "Atlas," she said finally, "begin preliminary manufacturing protocols. Start with communication arrays and reconnaissance vessels. It's time we learned what the galaxy looks like from the outside." As the ancient systems hummed to life for the first time in 3 millennia, Sarah felt the weight of history settling on her shoulders. She was no longer just the commander of a hidden colony. She had become the leader of humanity's return to the stars. The ice storms of Kepler 442b continued their eternal dance outside, but inside the ancient chamber, the first sparks of a new human renaissance began to glow. After 3,000 years of darkness, the children of Earth were finally ready to step back into the light. The reckoning begins. 6 months had transformed New Haven from a hidden survival colony into a hub of unprecedented activity. The ancient manufacturing systems worked tirelessly in the depths of Kepler 442b, producing the first human starships to be built in 3,000 years. Commander Sarah Voss stood in the newly constructed command center, watching holographic displays that showed their progress with a mixture of pride and apprehension. "The Resurgence is ready for her maiden voyage," reported General Thorne, the recently awakened military commander who had been in cryogenic sleep since the original Exodus. At 65, Marcus Thorne carried the experience of the old human coalition's final battles, his weathered face bearing scars from weapons that no longer existed. His revival from the stasis pods had been Atlas's suggestion, providing them with someone who understood pre-war military strategy. "Her stealth capabilities are beyond anything the Zephyrians have encountered," added Zara Kim, who had become the chief engineer of their expanding fleet. The young woman had grown confident in her abilities, her initial excitement tempered by the gravity of their mission. "The quantum phase shifters will make her virtually invisible to their sensor arrays." Sarah nodded, studying the sleek vessel displayed on the main screen. The Resurgence looked nothing like the crude transport ships their ancestors had used to escape Earth. This was a predator, built with 3,000 years of hidden advancement and the recovered knowledge of humanity's golden age. "What about our target?" Sarah asked, turning to Captain Elena Torres, who had been coordinating intelligence operations with Atlas. "The Kepler Mining Consortium operates throughout the Outer Rim," Elena replied, her tactical mind evident in every word. "According to Atlas's long-range monitoring, they use slave Lucky Podpotam, a boar from conquered species, primarily Altarians, based on the communication intercepts we've decoded." Dr. Marcus Reed looked up from his research station, his expression troubled. "Sarah, the Altarians were mentioned in Dr. Harmon's archives. They were one of our strongest allies during the Zephyrian Wars. If they're still alive and being enslaved, then our first contact mission just became a rescue operation," Sarah finished, understanding the implications. The plan had been simple: make quiet contact with potential allies, gather intelligence, and slowly build a resistance network. But discovering that their former allies were suffering under Zephyrian oppression changed everything. Atlas's mechanical voice filled the command center. "Commander Voss, I must advise caution. The Altarians were indeed strong human allies, but 3,000 years of subjugation may have altered their perspective. They may view any rescue attempt as a trap or a trick. Or they might welcome the return of old friends," Zara countered, her youthful optimism showing through. "We won't know until we try." Sarah weighed the options carefully. Every decision she made could determine the fate of not just their colony, but potentially the future of human freedom in the galaxy. The weight of that responsibility had only grown heavier as their capabilities increased. We proceed with the original plan, but we adapt as needed, she decided. Elena, you'll command the resurgence. Marcus, I want you monitoring everything from here and ready to provide guidance based on your pre-war experience. Zara, you're going with Elena as chief engineer and technology specialist. The mission launched 3 days later. The resurgence slipped away from Kepler 442b like a shadow, her quantum phase shifters bending light and energy around her hull until she became nothing more than a whisper in space. Insontabatus. Eyed the cramped but efficient bridge, Elena Torres felt the weight of commanding humanity's first offensive action in 3 millennia. Approaching the target system now, reported Lieutenant Commander James Park, their navigation specialist, and one of the few colonists with actual spaceflight experience. I'm detecting heavy traffic around the 4th planet. Looks like a major mining operation. Elena studied the tactical display, her military training analyzing every detail. The system was dominated by a massive asteroid field being systematically harvested by enormous mechanical extractors. Dozens of transport ships moved in careful patterns, carrying processed materials to a central depot station that rivaled some of the smaller cities she'd seen in historical records. There, Zara pointed to a cluster of smaller vessels near one of the larger asteroids. Those match the designs Atlas showed us for Zephyrian prison transports. If there are Altarian slaves here, that's where they'll be. Elena made her decision. Take us in closer, but maintain stealth mode. I want to know what we're dealing with before we commit to anything. The resurgence drifted through the asteroid field like a ghost, her sensors recording everything while her crew studied their first glimpse of the galaxy their people had fled. The Zephyrian ships were utilitarian and ugly, built for function over form, with little concern for aesthetics or crew comfort. But it was the prison transport that caught Elena's attention. I'm picking up life signs, Zara reported, her voice tight with emotion. Hundreds of them, packed into cargo holds that weren't designed for living beings. Elena felt anger burning in her chest, the same fury that had driven human resistance fighters 3,000 years ago. Can you identify the species? Running bioscans now, Zara replied, her fingers dancing across her console. Yes, confirmed Altarian signatures, but Elena, these readings, they're malnourished and showing signs of severe stress. T. had settled it. Elena opened a communication channel back to New Haven. Command, this is Resurgence. We have confirmed Altarian prisoners in deplorable conditions, requesting permission to implement rescue protocol. Sarah's voice came back immediately, strong and decisive. Permission granted, Elena. Bring them home. The rescue operation unfolded with the precision that only desperate necessity could inspire. The Resurgence disabled the prison transport's engines with a precise electromagnetic pulse, then cut through its hull using quantum torch beams that the Zephyrian guards had never seen before. When Elena and her boarding team entered the cargo holds, they found a sight that would haunt their dreams for years to come. The Altarians were tall, graceful beings with pale blue skin and large, expressive eyes that held intelligence and dignity despite their circumstances. They had been packed into spaces barely large enough for half their number, surviving on minimal food and water while mining equipment around them processed the wealth of the asteroids. Who? Who are you? Asked one of the Altarians in broken Standard Galactic, his voice weak but his eyes alert. Elena removed her helmet, letting them see her human features. We're friends, old friends, returned to help. The effect was electric. Despite their weakened condition, the Altarians began to murmur among themselves in their musical language. One of them, clearly a leader despite his captivity, struggled to his feet and approached Elena with tears streaming down his face. The descendants of Earth, he whispered in accented English, a language he had somehow remembered across centuries of oppression. We never forgot the promise. We never stopped hoping. His name was Ambassador Kethvar, and he had been born free before the Zephyrian crackdowns began in earnest. As the Resurgence carried the rescue, the Altarians toward Kepler 442b, he told Elena stories that filled in gaps their archives had missed. After the human worlds fell, the Empire began systematic subjugation of all former coalition species. Kethvar explained, his recovery remarkable now that he had proper food and medical care. They claimed we were infected by human chaos thinking and needed to be re-educated. Those who resisted were enslaved. "How many of you are left?" Elena asked, dreading the answer. "Scattered across the galaxy in labor camps and mining operations. Millions, but isolated and broken. Until today we had no hope of freedom." His large eyes fixed on Elena with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "But you have returned, just as the old songs promised. The children of Earth have come to break the chains." When the resurgence arrived at Kepler 442b, it carried more than rescued prisoners. It brought news that would reshape humanity's understanding of their place in the galaxy. Sarah stood in the medical bay, watching Dr. Reed examine the Altarians while Kethvar provided a steady stream of intelligence about Zephyrian operations. "There are others," the Altarian ambassador explained, his voice growing stronger by the hour. "The Korathi still maintain some independence in the Veil Nebula. The synthetics of the Nexus systems have been quietly building their strength. Even some Zephyrian colonies have grown tired of the Empire's oppression." General Thorne, his military mind already working on strategic implications, leaned forward intently. "These groups would be willing to fight?" "They have been waiting for someone to light the spark," Kethvar replied with conviction. "The Empire's greatest fear has always been that humanity would return to unite the galaxy against them. That fear has kept them paranoid and cruel, but it has also kept hope alive among the oppressed." Sarah felt the weight of destiny settling on her shoulders once again. What had begun as a simple survival mission was becoming something much larger, much more dangerous, and much more necessary than they had ever imagined. "Atlas," she called to the ancient AI. "What are our capabilities for long-range communication?" "With the quantum communication arrays now online, we can reach any point in the galaxy instantaneously," Atlas replied. "However, such transmissions would be detectable by Zephyrian monitoring systems." Elena understood the implications immediately. "They'll know we're alive the moment we send the first message." "Then we better make it count," Sarah said with grim determination. "Kethvar, can you provide us with communication protocols for the resistance groups you mentioned?" The Altarian ambassador smiled for the first time since his rescue. "I can do better than that. I can help you compose a message that will reach every oppressed being in the galaxy." Over the next week, they worked together to craft humanity's return message to the galaxy. It was not a declaration of war or a call for revenge, but something more powerful, a promise of hope and an invitation to join in reclaiming freedom. When Sarah finally activated the quantum communication array, her words carried across the galaxy with the force of a stellar explosion. "To all beings who remember the taste of freedom, to all species who refuse to bow to tyranny, and to all worlds that dream of liberation, humanity has returned. We are the children of Earth, inheritors of the Coalition's dream, and we call upon you to stand with us once more. The galaxy belongs to all of us, not just the few who would rule it through fear. Join us, and together we will build a future worthy of our sacrifices." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, quantum signals began arriving from across the galaxy. Some were cautious inquiries from species they had never heard of. Others were joyful confirmations from groups that had maintained Coalition traditions in secret. But it was the message from the Korathi High Council that made Sarah's hands shake as she read it. As alarms began sounding in Zephyrian command centers throughout the galaxy, Sarah looked out at the ice storms of Kepler 442b one last time. Soon, they would leave this frozen refuge forever. The galaxy awaited, and humanity would answer its call with all the strength, ingenuity, and determination that had carried them through 3,000 years of darkness. The age of hiding was over. The age of reckoning had begun.